Okay, part 6 now of the Venusian Vengeance commentary. This is the first jungle level. So, of course, going back to the general theme of the game, I wanted to be, based on old, particularly Soviet science fiction depictions of the planet Venus. So, you had the acid swamps and such, but you also have the lush jungles and such, which I am doing here, and this gives me a chance to introduce more alien enemies, since this is an area not inhabited by the communist soldiers. So I start by reminding the player of alien enemies by having a lot of these crawlers running around. Very easy start, nice little respite from the motorcycle level. And then I introduce a new alien enemy, which basically a lot of the enemies that I have in this section serve the general niches of enemies from previously in the game. So these, of course, fill the niche of the shooter. It has a very similar movement pattern, but of course, since this is later in the game, it's a harder enemy, so they shoot 3 shots instead of 1. But they have that similar moving side to side at slight angles pattern. So now, of course, I combine them with the crawlers in a section where you're moving. And also, again, you can see how I try to compose the composition of the screen. I generally try to keep it a little off center, so instead of having a thin corridor down the center, there's one on the side, and then some interesting cliffs and something on the other side. So I tried to make it very, a lot of little side passages and a lot of mushrooms around that you have to navigate around. So I wanted to give a feeling, as opposed to the rocky areas early on where there was more open space. Now it's a lot of twisty passageways to give the feeling of being overgrown forest areas. So now I introduce one of my favorite enemies in the game, the bears. These fill the general niche of the tackler, but they act fairly differently in that they just walk slowly towards the player. They're just big. They take a lot of hits and walk slowly towards the player. Most of the time I made sure that they came from 2 sides of the screen, like just there, so that they can kind of come from both sides attacking the player to keep them from just... if I had just one of those, it would be pretty easy to fight because you could just keep running around, but with more than one of them, especially on other sides of the screen, they're a bit more difficult because they can, again, kind of scissor in on the player and cut off their routes of escape if you don't run around in the right way. And then if I have other enemies, you have to A, worry about positioning and avoiding the bears, and B, fight the other enemies and avoid getting hit by crawlers and these things, projectiles. This will be useful. So again, I have an area that combines the bears with the other alien enemies I've introduced so far. And if you'll notice in this level, I do a lot more introducing enemies from off the screen than I did in previous levels. This is just something I wanted to play around with more, and also it's very useful for introducing those bears. And let's see what... Oh yeah, this enemy. These they're asleep at first, but if they get a line of sight on you, they'll start charging. So these also fill a similar niche to the tacklers. In fact, they're more similar to the tacklers than the bears are, but unlike the tacklers who only charge when they're really close to you and charge for a short distance, these will charge from long distances and will charge also for long distances, which leads to some interesting situations, especially with mushroom placement, since you can kind of hide behind mushrooms to stop them in their tracks momentarily, although they'll destroy the mushrooms that they run into, so it's only a temporary way to keep them away. And you can also, yeah, you can try to avoid them like that. And that brings us to the end of this level. See you next time.